credits, but it is 0.75 indirect credits. Just got that from WECP. So with that, I'll hand it over to Charlie.
I'm going to adjust my hearing aid here real quick. Yeah, excuse me for that. Which brings up something that I should tell you. I like to interact with the audience, and if you have any questions, just raise your hand or holler, but really holler loud because I've got kind of hard of hearing over the last 10 years. Thank you for the invitation to speak to your organization. What I'd like to do, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what's going on out in the Red River Basin these days, and then move on to talk a little bit about the North Ottawa project as advertised, and also a little bit about the Red Path project, both of which are still technically not completed. Hopefully we'll finish North Ottawa within about a year. And Red Path, if we could ever get the permits, we can start turning dirt on it. As most of you know, the Red River Basin is in northwestern Minnesota, northeastern North Dakota, and southern Manitoba. Begins down in Lake Traverse, and goes north up through the Canadian border, outlets into Winnipeg, Canada. There's about 50,000 square miles of drainage area, not counting the Assiniboine River, which is up in Manitoba, comes in from the west. So it's a very large drainage basin, a very problematic river system. The Red River runs right down the middle of it, right through the center. My pointer's not working, or I'll try to show you, but you can kind of see where it is. Cities along the river, the first black dot there is Wapton, Breckenridge area, then Fargo, Moran area, Grand Forks, and then on up to Winnipeg. It was a lake basin. It used to actually flow out of the lake basin to the south, down what's now the Minnesota River into the Mississippi. And it did that until an ice dam finally broke and the water could escape to the north. But in that time frame when it was a lake, there were a lot of sediment deposits and basically formed a very flat clay lake bottom and very little northerly slope. So the Red River that flows down the middle of it, slowly developed, not a very well developed stream, and very, very flood prone. Couple that with the fact that it flows north, so the melt pattern as it progresses south to north is about timed to coincide with the water that's coming from the south end, so that flood wave just builds on itself as it goes to the north. A little bit of history. Flooding began, of course, as you all know, back in Noah's time. On the Red River itself, the largest flood on record up until recently, actually up until 1997, occurred in 1897. So it's about 100 years of difference there. Back in the early 1900s, that's when most of the settlement and development of the Red River Valley took off, really. And it was made possible by a lot of drainage activity. And that primarily occurred in the early 1900s, from about 1900 to about 1920. In the 1930s, things kind of went haywire. Of course, you didn't have to get rid of any water anymore, but also the economic depression, ended up, a lot of the land that had been converted to agriculture in the early part of the century went back. So there was a fair amount of lands that had been drained, had been settled, that were actually abandoned, and they still are today. In the 1940s, 1960s, the Corps actually was a real big player, and building dams, they were typically big on-channel dams, and also did a bunch of river channelization projects, again trying to get the agricultural economy working better. In the 1950s and 60s in particular, and you know, aren't all inclusive time frames, the USDA, basically SCS at that time, and RCS today, did a lot of assisting in private drainage. So landowners were actually paid to construct ditches. Just to look at the flood pattern over the years, again, 1897, right over on the far side, very large flood. This is at Fargo. Actually, there was a flood before 1997 that just basically kind of exceeded that 1897 historic flood. But you can see there's been 3 since then that were bigger than that largest flood. And if you drew a trend line there, it would be fairly obvious that things are getting worse, so they're certainly not getting better. You could try to read a lot into that. Certainly the drainage activities, the channelization, all of those things played a role. Climate probably played an even bigger role, but it's always been a contentious issue as to whether we're making the flood worse by the activities we're doing on the landscape. This is the Grand Forks. The trend there doesn't look quite so bad. Here the 1897 flood and the 1997 flood, you can see that the 97 flood was a lot bigger. That core measurement though had almost 140,000 cubic feet per second. It's a little bit bogus because they were measuring that at the time that the levees failed in Grand Forks and the flows were a little bit erratic. A little more history, and this is maybe the more positive side of the history, at least it starts out more positive. Back in 1976, the legislature enabled a joint powers organization called the Red River Watershed Management Board. That board was established with some taxing power through its member districts to raise money basically to build floodwater storage projects. The Corps was already out of the business. They had pretty much determined they had done as much damage as they could do. But there were a lot of ideas left that were locally supported and needed a way to get implemented. Actually, we got off to a pretty good start. In the first 15 or so years, those 9 member districts, the joint powers districts, had completed 31 projects. Almost 100,000 acre feet storage, so it was a big deal. They had a couple more under construction at that time, and there were 13 being developed, not earning dirt yet, and about 20 more proposed. Caught the attention of the Corps, and I suppose some prodding from some environmental groups and some arguments over a couple of projects that were out there, prompted the Corps to impose a moratorium, basically shut down the activity of building these floodwater storage sites. And the DNR joined with the Corps in conducting an environmental impact statement. That process took about 3 years. The outcome was really bleak. The Corps and the DNR EIS concluded that if they built those 33 projects that were being contemplated, that there would be a net loss of wetlands and some other environmental issues. They didn't say that all projects, couldn't get a permit, but in general, their view of the program itself was a dim one. Well, permits were applied for on a couple, three projects, I don't remember how many, got denied on one. And based on that denial, the Red River Watershed Management Board filed a lawsuit against the state. Basically, take it to court and see if they could make better progress there within the environmental bureaucracy. Minnesota legislature saw what was going on. They weren't impressed. They thought, this doesn't make sense. We've got a subdivision of the state that we created by legislation suing the state. And there's got to be a better way to resolve the issue. So a process got started. It's generally called the mediation process. And actually, it was pretty neat. In that mediation process, we had representatives of virtually every agency that would be involved in water management, plus a couple of environmental groups. And the effort went on for, I guess, about 2 years. We had a technical advisory committee. A couple of us are here today, right? And that was a really good experience. A lot of common understanding was developed through both the agency mediation effort and that technical advisory committee. Mediation agreement was signed in 1998. It identified goals not only for flood damage reduction, but also for natural resource enhancement. Try to answer the questions as to what exactly are the agencies looking for, what are the environmental groups looking for, along with them what the flood control interests are looking for. Outcome of it was to set up a process for developing projects. It's called a project team process. And the idea was that we'll try to maximize the flood control and the flood damage reduction benefits of these projects, but we'd also try to incorporate as many natural resource enhancements as we possibly could to meet those natural resource goals. The way it works at the watershed district scale is that the watershed district board appoints the project team members. They basically appoint people that the various groups have suggested would be good to serve on such a team. Typically includes local landowners, county officials, township board members, SWCDs, and others, local people or local interests, sometimes cities. Also, of course, watershed district staff and 2 or 3 managers. Not so many as to form a quorum because it's not an official watershed board meeting. DNR, very well represented by waters, wildlife, and fisheries. Bowser, NPCA, and the other state organizations involved. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers invited, but not real good attendees. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service very involved in it. NRCS very involved, and others as appropriate depending on the project. It's a consensus-based process, basically meaning that everybody gets to provide input. Everybody at least has to get to the point of saying that I can live with this project. It might not be my favorite, I might prefer to build it slightly differently, but I can live with it. Nothing moves forward out of that unless everybody comes to that point. Either that or basically just totally against the project, then they get to write their own recommendation. It works. Actually, it works remarkably well. And I'm going to show you as we get into it That's the North Ottawa project. Hopefully we'll have a contract in a couple months to finish that one up in 10 years in the making. And the Red Path project, which is still in the developmental stage, actually we're applying for permits and going through the EW process right now. We're both in the Boyne Sioux Watershed District, which is right at the headwaters of the Red River Basin. A little bit closer look at the district itself. You can see the blobs of blue up there, of course, are lakes. Lake Traverse is the one along the border. The squiggly stuff is pretty much natural channels. The straight lines there, as you probably guessed, those are some of those legal ditches, most of which got constructed in the early part of the 20th century. You can see that green shaded area actually goes down through Lake Traverse. And Lake Traverse is one of the dams that the Corps built, or a reservoir upstream from one of the dams that the Corps built back in the late 1940s. It does provide, it is a flood control dam. It certainly provides a lot of floodwater storage, but not enough. It can hold about 2.5 inches of runoff. And a 100-year flood is typically a little more than twice that much. So big floods like 1997, when that reservoir fills, the Corps has to, of course, open the gates and get a heck of a flood wave that moves forward. The rest of the area, the yellow and the pink, flow pretty much directly into the Boyne Sioux River, which joins up in the northwest corner of the district with the Otter Tail River, and that's really the head of the Red River itself. To give you an idea of how widespread the damages are, this was from 1997. Each of those red dots is a road damage site, significant enough to qualify for FEMA. It looks like there's a lot more damages on the west side than the east, maybe there are, but the real difference on this map is that the townships didn't report in a way that we could recover the information in those counties on the east side, and also in Wilkin County in the northwest. So there's a lot more, there would be a lot more red dots up there if we actually had the more specific site data. So local infrastructure damage is a really big deal. Here's what the flood looks like. This is actually looking south. The Boyne Sioux River is in the middle of that. You can't really see anything except some trees along its banks. Pretty wide, about 4 miles wide. The flood there just upstream of Breckenridge. A little bit closer look inside Breckenridge itself. That's focused on the Wilkin County courthouse. The green there is not grass. That's just green porch. Well, moving on to the kind of projects that we're building today. This is the North Ottawa project. It's the Boyne Sioux Watershed District is the local sponsor. And out here is an area we call the Tinta Slough. Well, actually, we call it the Tinta Slough. The local people who try to farm in that area think that the Tinta Slough is really on the other side of that Highway 9. So some argue about where the original Tinta Slough was, but that was all farmland. And what you see there, I think that picture I took in 1997 again, was very flood prone, real flat area. People tried to farm that for years with really limited success. So the idea that we came up with was to build an impoundment out there in the middle of that real flood-prone farm area. We started out looking at about 4 square miles. We looked at everything from 1 square mile up to 10 square miles, but we settled on 3. And the concept is to gather the water from upstream, actually 74 square miles of upstream drainage area. That currently floods the area there, plus a little bit, adds up to about 10 square miles. So take the area then that floods now, put it all on about 3 square miles. And then, of course, hang on to that water, store it until it wouldn't have to downstream flood down. So fairly simple concept if you figure out how to water it. We also, and again, this is part of that project team or process. Look at how we can use that water, which we get almost every spring. We get excess of water. What can we do with that water that would be beneficial and useful? It's some secondary benefits. So we thought about these purposes. Primary, of course, is flood control. That trumps everything. It is a flood control project. Secondary benefits, the first one, this is one that I've really pushed for my whole career up here, is stream flow maintenance. We have mostly intermittent streams in the Red River Basin. They dry up in the summer, not every summer, but most summers. And if we could provide some improvement or more stabilized base flows, there'd be some really good habitat in some of the streams downstream. Resting and feeding habitat for migratory waterfowl and shorebirds. Typically, up until that point in time, we talked a lot about waterfowl, and we tried to work these into the earlier projects too. Don't get me wrong, we didn't go straight flood control. We always looking at a little bit of multi-purpose, but usually, if we were looking at habitat, it was for waterfowl. But in the mediation process, one of the veteran members really was from I can keep talking, I guess, the Audubon Society, and she really pushed for doing something for shorebirds. The waterfowl population hadn't been doing too bad. Duck hunters might disagree a little bit, but waterfowl at least wasn't in serious decline, but the shorebird populations were. Water quality improvement. We think we get that kind of automatically, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But if we can catch that heavy runoff from the springs, coming off of cultivated fields, which are really soft from the frost in the spring, carries a lot of sediment. At the very least, if we store that water for a little while, we can draw out a lot of the suspended sediment. Public recreation, in this case, for lunch. We didn't know if we were going to have a lot of reason to go out there and watch birds, but at least we were talking about it, that hey, maybe it would. Maybe it would bring a lot of traffic, tourist traffic to the area. Within the Boyd to Sioux watershed, this is where the project's located. It's that red square up there. And upstream from it, or east of it, in the crosshatched area, is the drainage area. In total, then, there's 71 square miles in the hatched area, and then 3 square miles in the project area. So the total control area is 74 square miles. Locally, it's a real big percentage of a couple of big ditch systems. It's about 23% of the Rabbit River yellow area, and about 5% of the Boyd to Sioux watershed. So it's a significant project, but obviously holding the water off from 5% isn't going to solve the whole downstream flooding problem, but it will reduce it by roughly 5%. As you can see here, there have been some fairly extensive plumbing efforts, out in that watershed, particularly in the west half of the watershed. The Beach Ridge area is kind of where those legal ditches start. And pretty much a ditch on every mile. What the project does It collects the water that was going west in those legal drains and the private drains, of course. Collects it through a diversion system. So there's a 4-mile long diversion channel coming down from the north. There's a 4.5-mile one coming up from the south, all bringing water then to the middle, where you see that inlet channel, which is 1.5 miles long, banked on both sides. And of course, the 3 square mile impoundment area that's banked on all 4 sides. When we were, contemplating building this project, even when we started building this project, one of the most often questions I would get from farmers out there is, how are you going to get the water into that impoundment? How big pumps are you going to use to pump the water into that impoundment? Well, of course, that wouldn't have been a practical way. Even if you could afford to do pumping, you wouldn't get it in there fast enough to do a whole lot of good. The idea then with the diversion system and the diked inlet channel is you gather the water when it's at a higher elevation, just a little bit further up the hill. It doesn't look like much of a hill on the flat country. You gather from that higher elevation, bring it down into that diked impoundment area. Plan view of the impoundment. This drawing shows what we hope to have out there on the landscape next year, or by next year. You can see that there's a relatively long, narrow cell on the west side, actually 2 miles long by 1/2 mile wide, and then 8 other individual compartments or cells that we'll be constructing this year in the remaining area. The flood control objectives, we wanted to be able to take the flows from a 100-year spring flood and actually direct them into the impoundment. So we've got enough inlet capacity to pass the peak flows of a 100-year flood. Also, we wanted to be able to store without any release everything from a 10-year storm, and we actually see that quite a bit. And then limit the outflows from a 100-year flood. In other words, we can get the 100-year flood into the impoundment, but at some point we've got to release it, and when it fills up, it'll automatically release some water, but basically limit the amount that it releases to what those 2 big ditch systems can handle. The operating plan, fairly simple. The outlets would normally be partway open. That's to, of course, get rid of excess water if we have excess water, but also to provide that stream flow maintenance. So normally at the beginning of any flood, the gates are going to be just partially open, but not wide. When flood conditions exist anywhere downstream, or if we could predict that flood conditions would exist when water from this impoundment would go downstream, then those gates have to be closed. If the gated storage capacity is exceeded, in other words, the impoundment is full, and you would automatically start to discharge. First it will go to JD2, and then second it goes to JD12. Why that preference? There's a city, not a small, not a big city, the small city of Tippah is downstream on JD12. So it's a matter of saying, okay, let's send it where it's likely to be the least troubles. If we know we've got an extreme event coming, we know we're not going to be able to hold all the water, then we may very well release some water early in the flood just to save that capacity until you really need it. Don't need to look too hard at this. Basically all the design parameters, but the numbers on the right-hand side are the most meaningful. Gated storage is about equivalent to 4 inches of runoff. You can hold the first 4 inches of runoff that come off of that 74 square miles. How does that compare with flood size? Well, a typical 100-year flood would generate about 5.5 inches, at least 100-year floods as we know them, if they don't get worse. So you can hold almost 75% then of a 100-year flood without any release at all. Before it gets to the emergency spillway, you add another ½ inch or so, and the top of the dam, which you'll never get to, would be 6 inches of storage, but that can't. The other number up there, the 1 inch, is the amount of that spring runoff that we want to put to some beneficial use. The average annual runoff in Boyer Sioux watershed is about 2 inches, so we're saying, okay, half of that average annual runoff, most of which comes in the spring, we're going to save and do something creative with it. So that after the spring flood, we would draw it down until we had 4,000 acre feet left in that impoundment. Again, these parameters aren't that important to kind of memorize. And what I'd like to point out is that inside slope includes a 40-foot wave protection berm. And the reason I'm pointing that out is I've got a couple of pictures that I want to show you that you might find interesting. The dikes are primarily road raises. We raise the road. The roads have been raised a lot, 10, 12, 13 feet. This picture was taken the first year it constructed, 2004. We had a big dirt work contract, and we had outlet construction contract, 2 different contractors. And the day that the contractors were to show up, particularly the dirt work, in fact, he did show up. The equipment came rolling through Timka. Didn't even stop. It was a huge amount of rain. I don't remember exactly, but about 7 inches or something. And our groundbreaking for the project was about a week after that, and we did the groundbreaking fireball stuff, so we couldn't be inside. But anyway, my idea is, so they're out here in the winter, and the beginning of the winter, actually worked all winter long, trying to put these concrete structures in, because at least they knew it wouldn't be raining. Dirt work the next year is shown from the aerial view. You can kind of see where the dirt's being borrowed from, these areas here, my laser pointer dying. But beginning then of the dike construction there on the west side, and a little bit on the south side, and then along the west side. There are 2 different contractors out here competing with each other. Most of the work's done with scrapers. Here you see about half a dozen of them if you look close. This is a more finished area. That's actually along the inlet channel. Those box culverts are 14 by 14. There's 2 of them placed side by side. Just early after, I think, after the season we went to go. We got a lot of water while we were building. In fact, we're still building, and we're still getting a lot of water. And this would be, I believe, the spring of 2010. And the pool is not full yet by any means, but it's filling up. You can see there's water over that whole 3 square miles. We actually didn't have the dike completed yet, so we couldn't hold much more than what you see right there. The ice chunks that are floating out in the pond, that basically was ice formed in those borrow areas, and we just floated up. Another view of the same thing. Actually, this one I believe is a different year, but again, you can kind of see what it looks like during the flooding events.
Charlie?
Yes.
That last slide,
Yes.
could you point out where those 8 cells are going to be going in?
Sure. Here.
Okay.
So yeah, in the east half, those 8 cells will be there. We'll get a better look at that,
Okay.
at that later. The ground actually slopes from east to west primarily until you get to this line right here. Then it actually comes up a little bit as you go west from there, because there's another beach ridge, a small one, that gives a little bit of a rise there. You can see a little bit of bare ground sticking up there in the northeast corner. The inlet to the impoundment, the inlet channel right there. Okay, let's talk a little bit about those secondary objectives. Downstream flow augmentation. So far, we're just doing that over the open water season. We certainly could do it all year long. We haven't tried that yet. But doing it over the open water season, we can provide a continuous outflow of about 5 CFS in a normal year. Wetter years would be more. But the effects of that would be to improve the fishery downstream and also enhance water supply. Provide feeding and resting habitat for migratory birds. Feeding areas for the shorebirds were what they like, and this is what I'm told. I'm certainly no expert at all on shorebirds or waterfowl for that matter. But that's where the project team process really helps, because those experts are at the table. But they like to feed in mudflat areas. The water goes down, the shorebirds come in and feed on whatever they're finding on mudflats. Feeding areas for waterfowl. We take some of that water that's coming off of a pool that we're drawing down to expose mudflats and put it into reflooding an area that has some other vegetation, might be crops, might be just volunteer weeds, whatever. But that makes for good feeding area for the waterfowl, that's the theory. The project site, the whole 3 square miles plus a little bit around the perimeter, has been designated as a state game refuge, so the birds really can rest in there, and it holds the birds for much longer than they would otherwise be in that area, because the hunters aren't chasing off that site. Water quality enhancement, remove sediment and nutrients carried in by the incoming water, and then public recreation. In this case, basically the opportunity for viewing the shorebirds and the waterfowl that are out there. Also, it has improved the hunting on the adjacent fields. This is a picture taken, I think, in 2009. You can see up there quite a bird. Those are primarily blues and snows. And those interior pool areas that we talked about, you can kind of see it subdivided there on the schematic. The exterior dikes are at 1020 elevation, those interior dikes are at 1016 or 1014 actually. Some of them are doing as low as 1012. They divided into 9 separate, or will divide it into 9 separate momentum pools. And again, the idea is that we can manipulate those levels and provide different kinds of feeding habitat. This is a schematic of the 9 pools. In the spring runoff, or following spring runoff, like I said, we're going to drain it down to the equivalent of 1 inch of runoff of 4,000 acre-feet. And about half of that will be in those A pools, the upper pools on the east side, and half of it in the C pools. The B pools, this is typical now. We'll manage this differently in different years, but for this scenario, at least we're saying that those B pools are actually dry. We drain them dry. Let some vegetation grow there. Maybe go out and grow some fast-growing annual crops. Stream flow augmentation, about 5 CFS depending on availability. The mudflat exposure will start drawing down those A pools. And you can see a schedule there that again isn't cast in stone, but we'd start drawing down that most northerly A pool about the 1st of July, and we have it gone all the way down by the 1st of August. And then we just sequentially start each of those a couple of weeks apart. Again, trying to create a wave of mud flat area. And we'll be reflooding those deep pools and just ignore what's written on them. This shows kind of a tip, this is animated, so you kind of watch it. After the spring flood, we're drawing down to that 4,000 acre feet, that's about what we're at right now. And all the time, you don't see water coming out the north end, but there's water coming out the north end. You can see that mud flat area opening up on the northeast pool, A1. Now we're starting on A2, A3. You see the D pool starting to reflood. When we're done, well, I'll let this finish, I'm sorry. Now the D pools are drying off. The idea is to get the plant empty before it all freezes up. So basically by 1st of December. Well, that's a typical summer operation. We can actually vary that. We can drain any of those A pools first. We can fill any of the D pools next. You know, when we get the plumbing all installed out there, we'll have the ability to really move water around. This is one of the outlet structures, and I mentioned that wave protection berm. This is probably about the first year after construction there, and you see this long wet area. That's a swale within that wave protection berm. We can go into the dynamics of the wave protection if you want, but you're probably more interested in what really turns out to be a type 1 wetland. That's that same area after the vegetation has established. Doug Mensing asked me earlier what kind of vegetation we got going. I said, well, maybe you can identify it.
It's like some big moose down and a big sunflower. I don't know.
Okay. Out in the middle, this is pool C. Cattails, I don't know how they did it, but when we first put water on that sucker, they just appeared from everywhere. So there's a stockpile of cattail seeds. Another look at all that structure. The big blue spin, right?
That looks like Indian grass.
Oh, okay, Indian grass, I'm sorry. This is one of the internal controls. This is actually a control that lets water into the A pool. We've got 4 of those, so we can let it into any of the A pools that we want to. Where do we get the money? Project cost, or will cost, hopefully it will cost more than this. Like I said, we're almost about $19 million. And about 75% of that came from the state of Minnesota's flood damage reduction program. 16% roughly, and again, don't write these numbers down because I might have it wrong. It's about 16% from the Reservoir Watershed Management Board, and about 9% from the Boyd Sewer Watershed District. Okay, that's my last slide. I'm going to talk about some numbers. Oh, it wasn't my last slide. Sorry about that. What's next? Obviously, to complete that interior dike construction, hopefully we'll have that done by sometime next year, but earlier. And then start managing those summer pool levels. And the term that the committee generally uses is adaptive management. We're going to see what happens out there, and we're going to manage the water levels accordingly. So there is no written plan for how these pools are going to be operated every year, year after year. We're going to do what makes sense or seems to make sense based on what's happening out there. Flood operations, of course, are by the Wetland Watershed District. When there's a flood, whatever else is going on out there, the gates will be closed to provide that flood protection. This is the most interesting thing that's happening right now is a water quality experimental project that the Watershed District is doing in cooperation with the Red River Basin Commission. That's a basin-wide organization that includes Manitoba, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota. And the idea is to use the cattails out there to take up the excess nutrients coming from that 74 square miles of drainage area. Now, you guys probably know these things, but cattails, like any other growing plant, take up nutrients. The problem is that they die, they decompose, the nutrients, particularly phosphorus, basically recycles. So the idea is that you let the cattails take up nutrients, but then you actually go in and harvest the cattails to remove those nutrients and minimize the amount of recycling. So that's an experiment that actually could start as early as next year. The Basin Commission has gotten at least one grant, and they're applying for more to do a study out there. Yes, ma'am.
Are they going to be harvesting those with ice mowing, or do you know the methods and what they're going to do with biomass?
I'm sorry?
Do you know how they're going to harvest it? Are they going to ice mow it?
That's a really good question. Well, one advantage we've got that most cattail marshes don't have is we can drain the darn thing. We can go in there with conventional equipment and harvest it. But I don't see us going in there and outland mining or harvesting the whole thing like we would a crop. We probably do it more creatively and open up areas, just open a different area each time.
And are they doing anything with the biomass?
Well, there is a farmer that is right next here that has cattle. So obviously, one of the first choices would be to feed it. But some say that that's not good food. Others say, and once they get used to it, actually they'll do just fine. So that's part of the experiment. What the heck you do with the cattails? They talk about biomass burners and all of that. Well, those are nice ideas, but not particularly practical. But let's just see where that goes. The main goal for us is to get rid of the nutrients, especially with TMDLs. Virtually every stream in the Red River Basin either has or will have a TMDL. And we need to figure out ways to deal with that. Warbirds, that is the last one. North Ottawa. Red Path project. Here's the concept there. Again, you see a big flooded area. JD 14, that line right there. There used to be a river there, the Stinker River. But Corps fixed that. We have JD 14. Okay, so what are we going to do? Build an off-channel impoundment on JD 14. Following that red outline. Establish a Mustinka River corridor, should we say, reestablish a Mustinka River corridor around the impoundment. Again, I'll look at the plumbing. You can see the old, or at least where we think the old Mustinka River was. Mustinka River was a lot of different places. If you can imagine, we come out of the Beach Ridge area, it was a lake. So there's kind of a delta there. And like most deltas, and of course you drain off most deltas, the water takes different courses. So there's fragments of channels, scattered around out there. But that's kind of the main channel that was there before the JD-14 construction. The JD-14 also included some work on a major tributary, 12 Mile Creek. That was just clearing and snagging, so that's still crooked. And then there was a cutoff channel as part of that project that actually took water on a 5 Mile Creek, but over in 12 Mile Creek. So major plumbing effort. Wasn't the only plumbing that's gone on out there. You can see again, we're in an area where there's a legal ditch virtually every mile. Again, looking at 5 Mile Creek, you can see 5 Mile Creek gets cut off every mile. Pretty elaborate system. JD-14, there's a picture of JD-14 today, well, actually a couple of years ago. The meandering channel that you see is in the bottom of JD-14. The original design would have had the bottom of the channel right about here where the bank flow of the meandering channel is. There's a little bit of deposition up there, but not much, frankly. What's really happened over the years is down cutting. And it's down cut by up to about 5 feet at the upstream end. The design on this wasn't real good, particularly at the upstream end. They basically tried to get the grade back up to where the Stinker River was, so it got wide. It's a mess. So here's the project team. Intelligent looking group of guys, right? We're out there trying to figure out what to do. That's all part of the project. Drainage area upstream of this one is much bigger, about 200 square miles. The impoundment itself is about the same size, about 30 square miles. There's a big difference. Well, no, I won't try to do it. But you can see there is a lot of natural storage still up in that upper part of the watershed. When the Stinker River's coming down from the north, really it starts almost up Ottertail River, flows south, then turns west here and headed down across the beach areas. Can't be anywhere else. That's where the Ottawa project is. This is just an image with the end of the eye wetlands overlaying on there. Of course, as good citizens, we try to find a spot to put these projects where there isn't a lot of existing wetland out there. And I think we hit it about as well as we could, and it turns out to be a place where it's feasible to build a project. Proposed project benefits: primary, reduce the downstream flooding, of course, on JD-14. Breakouts to the Rabbit River, I didn't talk about that, but when JD-14 overflows, now water doesn't all just follow it and go down to Lake Traverse, to the reservoir there, breaks out, goes north, adds to the flooding on the Rabbit River, bypasses that big flood control reservoir, goes on to Lake Traverse, of course, itself. When the water's high there, there's a lot of flood damage. When you go to the Sioux River, you benefit that, and the Red River altogether. Basically, reduce cropland damage, farmstead damage, road damage. Secondary benefits: provide or improve fish and wildlife habitat, green stream habitat for fisheries, improve that. Create a wetland spawning area for northern pike, which the fisheries guys said, hey, Lake Traverse needs more spawning area in the stream. And then again, feeding and resting areas for migrating birds. Water quality improvement here, primarily reducing erosion, some of that erosion that you saw just within the channel itself, of course, as well as cutting down on that overland sheet flow erosion that we get in the ponds. And drop some of that on there. Recreation here, along with for bird watching. This area isn't bought, no decision made yet, but we don't anticipate creating a refuge here, so there'll be hunting allowed on those lands. Components of the project are the impoundment, construct that flood storage facility, then we're gonna divide it into 3 pools. And then river corridor improvements or enhancements. You can't call this a restoration of the river because it doesn't follow those old river channels, but we're going to create something that's similar. Kind of the layout here, you see the red outline of the dike area, a dike inlet channel coming in that's an I-1, and 3 pools, and a bypass corridor along the north side. And that bypass corridor is not only excavating a channel, but excavating a floodway along with the channel. And that works out really good in combination with this project because we can excavate that dirt, it becomes a borrow area, and we use that in the construction of the dikes. If you remember what I said, this kind of a delta area, so the land along the river is actually a little bit higher than the land a mile away. So there is no natural valley there. We're basically excavating a valley. Flood operation, pools will automatically fill sequentially in this case.